what I find so interesting is that there's actual data that demonstrates through EEG, electroencephalogram readings, that human brains and the electrical impulses that they create are triggered, generated, and traversed through different parts of the brain based on the individual. So to make that simpler, what that means is if you were to look at the brick wall behind you and I were to look at the brick wall behind you, the electromagnetic activity in our brains would be uniquely different, right? That would trigger certain memories for you that it doesn't trigger for me, certain questions for you that it doesn't trigger for me. It might trigger certain responses to me to the color that it doesn't trigger for you. So our actual EEGs would look different. Here's what's really fucked up. If you and I look at that wall sitting next to each other together, there's a third variance that occurs. Just because your electrical brain field and my electrical brain field are within proximity to each other.
So like a collective resonance of this kind of mirror neuronal effect where we're actually seeing the same thing.
That's measurable. Whoa is right, dude. The idea that it could happen sounds woo-woo. The idea that you can actually measure it is fucking crazy. Super cool, right? Because now what happens if we put 5 people staring at that wall? What happens if we find a way to harness the new energy that's being created by the fact that there's 2 of us looking at the wall?
Right.
That's energy that wasn't there before. When I hear about people having sightings in the sky, in many ways, what I'm thinking of is that they're looking at a brick wall and they're having their own reaction, their own EEG response, right? Electrical impulse response in their brain to what they're seeing. The more eyes that see the thing, whether it's social media or whether it's collective sightings because it happened at a football game, right? The more people that see it, the more energy is being created because they all have their own different response to the thing that they're seeing. And then when you put those people into proximity, the more it creates, the more is generated further. Some might call that like a collected hysteria or a mass hypnosis or something along those lines. I am more willing to believe that the energy is going to the thing, almost as if the thing presented itself as a sink to generate energy, possibly to feed itself. Does that mean it's intelligent? Not necessarily. It could be completely and totally biological that we just have no idea about, like a whirlpool or a tornado. It just happens, right? There's enough high pressure and low pressure and it turns itself in a direction because of temperature, and now all of a sudden you have a little vortex sand dirt devil in Arizona. It could be the same kind of thing that we're looking at right now. Who knows? But what's super interesting to me is if you look at it at a macro level, if you do ask yourself the question about intelligent life in the universe or extra-dimensional creatures that might be interested in you or me or the rest of the human race, when they see a human being, they see a little self-powered source of energy that can literally create more or less energy based off of the thoughts that we're having at any given moment. Right? You read an erotica novel, you create strawberry-flavored energy. You read a fucking sci-fi novel, you create cumin-flavored energy. Who knows? But
Cumin for sure.
But we can generate energy. And I mean, that's not too much of a stretch from the human experience. We're all on the hunt for sources of energy, whether it's a banana, whether it's somebody that will listen to us when we talk, or whether it's a rare earth mineral in the ground.
Yeah. You know, it's also an interesting thought to me is I think about like the ancient pantheons of gods, and some of them are actively worshipped in the polytheistic cultures, like in Kashmir Shaivism or Hinduism. You know, there's many different gods, from Shiva to Kali to Durga to Hanuman to all of these different beings. But then I also go back to formerly, you know, in my mind, I would think, okay, well, maybe some of these beings are real, but some of them are, you know, probably just made up. And I always thought of like the Greek gods and goddesses, like there's stories. And maybe, but then also when people actively worship through the process of collectively identifying and almost like aggregating from the archetypal structures that are available in capital M mind of the collective consciousness, when they focus all of that attention to carve out borders that actually, whether the entity was real in primacy and people were actually downloading the information, or whether it was created by the collective belief, what I've realized is like these things exist. And again, I don't understand whether they were like primeval and they like began that way, or whether through the collective belief we created what's called an egregore, or this like collection of energy around something that is then able to be interacted with in an interesting way. But I think this all points to how this is like a co-created cosmos where it goes kind of back and forth. And like even those strange stories about like Tinkerbell, and if you don't believe in fairies, fairies don't exist anymore. It's almost like fairies could be like one of these things. Maybe they have always existed, or they started to exist because people believed in them. And then as soon as people stop believing in them, a new fairy falls out of the collection of existence.